So today I've got Schizoid Angst back, and we're going to be having a chat about the challenges of having SPD and being in a relationship, and also the challenges that may come from parenting with SPD. And really, today, Angst, I just want to look into your journey and just to find out how you've been affected as a consequence of having SPD and having to adapt to relationships. So, to start off, I'd like to know that, say, when you were in your teenage years, did you have any desire to be involved in an intimate relationship, or what were your thoughts about relationships, starting out?
Well, let me think. Because just to clarify though, is it
Hmm.
SPD and some people say SPD and some people say SZPD? Is it?
Well, we're talking about schizoid personality disorder,
Yeah.
and
SZPD.
I'm just sort of shortening it. So
Oh, okay, good. Because
SPD,
I thought
yeah,
SPD gets a typo, and I just don't want, or is it
no,
ST?
but thanks for
Okay.
making that clarification, though. In
No,
case,
yeah,
and I
yeah. I
have
just
seen people use
yeah,
SZPD.
yeah,
It's more of a mouthful.
yeah. It really
I'll just
is.
say being schizoid. I'll just say being schizoid because I think
Yeah,
that would just make everything a bit clearer
yeah.
for everyone.
I
Yeah.
just say Zoid, so. But
So it's fine. So
yeah.
it's absolutely fine.
But
Mhm.
okay, so in regards to growing up, looking for intimate relationships in my teenage years, um, I think I was looking for understanding. I don't think I was looking for any kind of romance during those years.
Mhm.
Um, I might have, had a somewhat functional libido, so I might have been looking for something else as well. Um,
Mhm.
so, so I think in that case, I wasn't searching for. I don't think I was searching like to find. I wasn't looking for love or anything like that. It was more like, well, it's something people do. It's something that I should probably try to experience. Um, I am attracted to people, like sexually attracted to people. So I
Mhm.
guess it would only stand for me. Like it makes sense for me to attempt to at the time, get a girlfriend or something. And I remember though most of the girls in my high school I wasn't interested in the least because um, it needed to not just be someone that I found to be pretty, but it needed to be someone that I could actually uh, tolerate long periods of time talking to.
Mhm.
And so usually in high school, if I did develop some kind of crush, the girls that I eventually did date and did have crushes on were usually like highly introverted and yeah, just highly introverted and probably had like various other mental health issues. Because it was essentially the weirdos that
Right.
that the weird girls, the loner weird girls that I was probably most interested in talking to and attempting something of that nature. But yeah,
Right. And were you influenced at all to develop crushes on fictional characters or cartoon characters or anything like that?
I did have some of that pre, like probably junior high, like just when I started going through puberty. I probably
Hmm.
did have some weird like fixations. Um, it never got into the level of something like erotomania or anything like that. It was more just like, why does this character, and I'm not gonna say which one, or maybe I should. I don't care. So, like for example, like when I was little, for some reason, like I kept eyeballing Gadget from Chippendale's Rescue Rangers. Uh,
I don't know. Was she on a car? Is that a cartoon?
yeah, it was like an American cartoon. It's probably one of the characters that eventually inspired adults to become like things like furries or something. But it was
Hmm.
basically like a mouse girl that was, rough and tough, but really smart.
I think
And
I actually
she had like a
remember
shapely
her.
form that was not mouse like at all. And so, yeah, that probably like she started looking different to me as a kid. So I guess I noticed the features at that point. Outside of that, mm, I don't think so. I think that was the only instance when I was like going through puberty that something weird like that happened. I essentially pivoted to actual humans pretty quickly by high school.
Correct, cool.
Hmm.
And did you like have any sort of attitudes when you were at that age group around marriage? Or did you have any ideas like what your
Oh, I
thoughts
didn't
were
want that at
there?
all. I didn't want that at all. Zero. Like if you would have talked to me as a teenager, even if you would have talked to me in my early 20s, I would have been like, no way, I'd never want to get married, and I never want to have kids. Like that would have been my position. No holds bar. Like I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids because that meant like now I understand why and what the
Mm-hmm.
fear was, but that essentially meant sort of a threat to my autonomy. So and I wasn't going to have that because, well, whatever it is that people or a person would want from me in those instances, at least at the time, I didn't know what I would even want from them so that I would feel rewarded in that situation or it would be worthwhile to make any of those sacrifices related to like my freedom, essentially, to do what I want to
Mm-hmm.
when I want to.
Okay, so like transitioning into like forming relationships, like maybe your first relationship
Okay.
experience or so forth.
Uh huh.
Um,
Yeah, we talk about that.
was that was did you was the first person you had a relationship with the person that you're married to now, or was there some steps in between, like this
Definitely
teenage
steps
day
in
and then?
between. Definitely steps in
Mhm.
between. Like my first girlfriend, um, they were kind of an introverted. They had their own mental health stuff going on, um, and that's what initially. And they also kind of dressed in sort of dark kind of ways, which was also kind of my aesthetic that I found attractive. And so, yeah, I remember that relationship lasted. That was my first relationship. It lasted, I think, almost 3 years. So it was like sophomore year, I think, junior, and then it ended sometime at the end of senior. And yeah, see, 'cause that was an interesting one because I still wasn't like super connected to them, like on a human connection level, but I did enjoy their company because they liked the same things as me, and they didn't mind like my sort of pessimistic nature because they were kind of pessimistic themselves. So their company was like a lot more. I wouldn't say like exciting or enjoyable, but because I couldn't really feel a lot of that stuff at that point. But it was more novel and interesting to me. And then, of course, the physicality of the situation um, was um, was I guess relieving certain certain worries or concerns, whatever you want to call it. So, but yeah, like it. I can tell you how it ended, and it's actually quite interesting. I
Mhm.
would think. Hopefully, they don't ever hear this, but I don't think it would really matter at this point. That was how long ago? Like 20 years ago. So the way it ended is very zoidy. Um, I was going to leave the state because I was going to do the school thing in a different location. And in my mind, I thought, well, I'm going to be gone. And I have also noticed that my that girlfriend was uh, she actually had a crush on or was attracted to someone else in the sort of group that she was associated with, like people, whatever friends. And I think I remember basically along the lines of telling both the guy and her, like, oh, just so you know, I'm quite aware that you guys sort of have this unrequited thing going on here. I'm perfectly fine with it. In fact, like I would say, go for it because I'm going to be leaving the state, and I think it'd be best for both me and her if we broke up. Like that's literally how I handled it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really feel much like emotionally about it. I in my head thought, oh, it's okay. I will go to this new place, and I'm sure I will, find similar, and then I could experiment with that part of my life, and see what happens with that and stuff. I never really had this notion of like, oh, I'm going to marry this girl. She's the love of my life, or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I really cared about them at the time to whatever degree that I could, but which is more like cognitive empathy than effective empathy
Mm-hmm.
at the time. Um, yeah, I mean that was probably my first one. That's how it kind of ended. So yeah, I just like stepped aside and I'm like, yeah, and then they got
It's
together.
quite cool.
Yeah, I just I just don't I didn't
There was
see
no
any.
attachment. It sounds like there was no attachment
No,
there.
I didn't
Right?
feel possessive
Mm-hmm.
of them or anything like that. It was just more like obviously because things didn't work out so great when as I thought they would, because I didn't really find anybody out there that I was like interested in or anything. I did of course the one thing I did miss was some of the physicality. So
Mm-hmm.
that brought some of the comfort that brought on existentially lonely nights.
Do you think she was at all frustrated with your lack of sort of emotional connection to her, or do you think because of the way she was, it sort of fit the situation?
um, well, from if I were to guess, like they kind of had I don't know, it's been so many years, but they kind of had an avoidant um, what do you call it, avoidant attachment style.
Mm-hmm.
So they had their own sort of distance, and
Right.
that's kind of why it sort of worked to
Mm-hmm.
some for that period of time. Like why I never had this urge to break up with them or be done with them. We had like fights and stuff, but I would just kind of like I would usually just it would usually be something like that I was being what's the word inconsiderate emotionally to her or something, and then I would try to make up for it or calm the situation
Mm-hmm.
by doing a little bit better at it or something. But well, sorry, I missed the. I mean, maybe I missed the
Yeah,
question.
that's fine. I was just asking whether she might have been frustrated with the lack of emotional
Oh,
attachment on your part.
yeah. I to some degree I would say yeah, but also because I was always sort of calm and they probably thought I was relatively safe, and because I was a homebody and they were
Mm-hmm.
too, they were
Mm-hmm.
perfectly fine not going out. They had social anxiety, so
Okay.
I didn't have social anxiety. I just had kind of an aversion, and so it kind of worked because we would just basically go to school, come. They would hang out at my place the whole time, or we would go to their place, and my parents were at my house, her parents were at her house, and we would just play video games and watch scary movies, and then when no one was home, you had a little fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And have you found like throughout your relationship journey with anyone who you have formed a relationship with that they have been the person to initiate the relationship? Or have there been any times when you felt comfortable enough to initiate the relationship connection?
I think that first one, I somewhat initiated. Yeah, I did. I think I had been like thinking I have to, and so that I did. I said I think I had asked them out on a date, and then it just kind of ended up that way, and then it was just reciprocated, or it was pretty apparent that there was attraction there. As far as any other time, there was a few times where somebody was trying to with me, but I just wasn't interested um, because of various reasons. And so I had to like figure out a way to sort of let them down easily because I didn't want conflict. Because it was usually somebody that I was either, like going to school around back then. I lived in Arizona, so yeah, there was a. It would have been like more like a soft, like, oh, I'm not really looking for something, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but that's the only time I think that happened like maybe three different times in my life, and it was particularly during those years. And but I would say like the three other times I had been the person that engaged. So there was like one, two between, but there wasn't any other relationship until I started dating my wife, who the person who's now my wife. Yeah, but it
Right.
wasn't until her that I started developing like an actual romantic connection.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
And so in meeting your wife, would you say that the initial pull and attraction came from shared interests, or was it something to do with spending time together through work, or
Okay, I'll be very honest. I was just very much initially physically attracted to her, and she had kind of a what's the word? I usually liked I usually would be attracted to like people that were kind of aloof and a bit distant or
Mhm.
sarcastic. And so she kind of had like a sarcastic kind of aloof personality. Um, Knew how to joke around and can take jokes and such. Just banter essentially. Uh,
Mhm.
when I would when I would when I started getting more into her like as a person, not just as yeah, it was more like because like I would say like I would be really crass or blunt at this point in my life about stuff that I didn't like, and like usually I would get responses from people where they would either be offended or bothered by my opinion because I was just saying what I was thinking. Um, and but her responses were more like I don't care, like I would be like, oh, you listen to that band? They're not very good. And then she'd be like, so I don't care. I don't care what you think.
Mhm.
And I'd be like, I like this. so
Yeah.
like and so and she's always kind of had a strong attitude. And I don't know, I guess maybe just something about that. And then the aloofness is what allowed me to sort of connect to her emotionally over the course of time, um, because it was safe, it was
Mhm.
non-invasive, it was non-engulfing, because it would be like, how do I put this? Like she kind of has like, I don't know how to explain it except for like a sort of aloof attitude about a lot of things, and she will talk shit sometimes, and like it made me comfortable enough because there wasn't all this like intimacy like there wasn't this like intimacy obligation, of like, oh, let's just cuddle all day, or let's she would basically like just kind of join me in doing whatever it is we had mutual interest in, and and stuff like that. Like it was just like, and then even in the physical space, uh, she was more into, as well, more into the physicality of it, um, and didn't really concentrate too much on like pillow talk and what is it like cuddling after doing stuff. It was like literally do stuff and then, oh, let's watch that movie, you know.
Right.
So, or let's go out and have some Taco Bell or something. I'm hungry now. I'm thirsty. And so then like it was that kind of attitude they sort of had because of their own stuff, right? It kind of
Mhm.
you know had them develop this sort of jokingly, I feel like a sort of tsundere attitude. if you know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what's in the day. How
It's
do
like,
you,
oh
what does
man,
that
I can't believe I
mean?
brought that up. It's like a weeb thing. Like I'm a nerd for like anime and stuff, and so the
Okay.
we have these like terms for like different types of usually girls. So you know,
Mm-hmm.
like it would be like the ones that are like aggressively, violently jealous, the ones that are
Mm-hmm.
aloof and could pretend to take you or like take you or leave you, but internally actually like have strong emotions for you, right? So that was kind of
Yeah.
the kind of uh, attitude that she sort of had that I found initially safe enough to sort of gravitate toward, right? Because if I were to say something like, "Oh, blah blah blah," and she's like, "Well, if you don't like it, whatever," like she'd be like she's like, "Well, if you don't have to," like she would tell me something like, "You don't have to be with me if you don't want to. I'll be fine."
Right.
You know, and that might have been her defenses or whatever, like after like a big fight or something. And I found that safer than if like she would have been like crying and begging me not to, you know, risk breaking up with her or something like that. Like that would have made me like run, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was that kind of attitude of just like, well, it is what it is. Her attitude like that was even though internally she was probably like distraught, she didn't display
Mm-hmm.
it, and I wasn't keen enough to really pick that up yet, right? I thought she like meant it, and so that made me feel like, oh, okay, so there's not going to be a big blow up, a big conflict, and I'm like, oh, that's good. And then
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying because she wasn't imposing emotions or needs onto you. So it sounds
like
like she was really chilled out and gave you a lot of space.
yeah, and the needs she was imposing on me were like reasonable, and she was like it's like, well, we do this thing that you like, we should do more of the things I like too, because that's in like to make it even or fair. And I'd be
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that's not unfair. So if it was fair, it didn't really bother me much. But
Mm-hmm.
it was this idea of like, I don't know. I even had this strange thing where I never let her meet my friends, and let my
Mm-hmm.
friends meet her, because I used to like compartmentalize the groups
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
that I was sort of, because I didn't want conflict to occur, and then I had to
Right.
deal with it. Because like say I have these two friends or these three friends I play video games with, right? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
connected to them, but you know, on any like real friendship level, but we play games. They have weird attitudes. They're like kind of immature. She's
Right.
kind of level headed, more mature. I didn't want them to, you know, bash, and then I have to deal with,
Yeah.
oh, you can't. I don't like those friends, or them saying, oh, your girlfriend's like, ugh. And so I would like, I told her this. That's what's so interesting. Like when she eventually she asked me, how come like, or something came up to where like, how come you don't let me meet your friends or something? And I
Mm-hmm.
explained it. I explained I just don't want. Eventually, I did, and luckily for me, it was fine. But the what made it safe for me to do that is when I told her the thing about like I just don't want conflict. I don't want you to, if you don't like them. What if like, you know, you tell me that you don't want me to be around them as much, or you get annoyed when I go out with them to do something, right? And then she basically told me, she's like, it's fine if I don't like them. I just don't want to be around them. You can do whatever you want. And so like that attitude toward it is what made it like made me actually okay with kind of bringing that together, because it's like, oh, there's no risk. Okay, so if you don't like them, all I have to worry about is that you just don't want to be around them, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm okay with you not liking them, just to
Mm-hmm.
cause problems
No
for
conflict. Yeah.
yeah, all this like all this fucking fighting and bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you know, in my mind, even then, it was like, if two people don't like each other, why don't they just not talk? Why do they like combat? It doesn't make sense. Um,
Yeah. And did you like in the beginning? Did you find it hard to express your needs, or was that not really a necessity for you?
express my needs. Um, well, I'm trying to think. Like, I mean, I didn't have to worry about physical needs because they also had a healthy libido.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. I had needs when it came to like needing time to like play my video games or read my books or be a little more isolated. Um,
Mhm.
Usually, it kind of worked out because like we had like different times we worked at. Like I was like a night owl, and they would go to bed at like a more reasonable hour and like go to work in the morning. So then, like usually the evenings and the mornings, or depending on when I worked, were like kind of just mine. So
Mhm.
it didn't really become too much of an issue
Wasn't an
living
issue,
together.
right?
You know, or first moved in together, it wasn't like a big thing. Um,
Right.
yeah.
And like, who proposed to who? Like, how did that decision come about?
Well, we had like talked about it before a little bit,
Mhm.
but I had proposed to her.
Okay.
Um, it was a very quiet proposal because she had told me a long time ago. She said before I proposed to her, like maybe a year or two before, because we were with each other like at least I think it was like 5 years or 6 years before we even got married. Um, but the she told me that if you ever did the thing where you kneel in front of me at like some public place, I will say no because
Good for her.
she hates attention, right? She doesn't like it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and she has some social anxiety and certain things. But like, yeah, she's like, I'll say no. I'll say no. Even if I want to, I'll say no. So don't ever do that. And I'm like, okay, I won't. I won't do that ever. And I didn't.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and so yes, we got married, and we didn't really. She's not very religious. I'm not very religious. Well, we
Mhm.
grew up Latino Catholic or whatever, and so we just did it in the courthouse. We didn't care about like a big thing or being sanctified by the church or some stuff like that. Didn't make,
Was it more sort of like practicality, like legal reasons for it, rather than like you say you're not religious or anything like that? So was it just a matter of like sort of just to cement things, like
no,
you know?
it was. I'm sure. No, it was symbolically important to her. Um,
Mm,
and it did make a I did eventually sort of like understand the kind of symbolic nature of it. I understood like what it meant and what it was supposed to be for, and how it
mm,
impacts positively society for some form of marriage or marriage like tradition to occur or to exist,
mhm.
because then it increases the chances of working stuff out, instead of just like say a person giving into their defenses completely and then just either
Right.
ghosting or leaving them or having a
Mhm.
meltdown. So yeah, I mean, I would say it was. I did understand the I understood cognitively the emotional nature of it.
Mhm.
It's just that
Yeah.
I wasn't like, oh, I'm married now, I'm married. Like, all the stuff about people like, oh, go get married or oh, get married, it's beautiful. Like, I,
Mm,
I wasn't like worried about
mm,
at that point because like I was like, this is a person I can spend the rest of my life with because
mhm.
they don't they don't
Yeah.
trigger they don't cause me discomfort. I didn't know they were my defenses at the time, but because I didn't know
Yeah.
I had that personality disorder. But yeah, I got lucky.
Right.
I got
Okay.
really lucky. Like I tell people this all the time. They're like, "Oh, how'd you get married?" I'm like, if I didn't meet her, I would not be married right now, and I probably would have kids.
Mhm.
I would not have kids.
Right.
It's just I got
And
incredibly lucky with her.
right. And like the sort of journey towards like fatherhood, was that something that you planned or something that emerged and that you adapted to? Like,
Um, well, it's sort of yeah. Here, I'll tell a story. And by the way, just as a pro tip to any of the Zoids out there, um, I didn't get into I landed this luckily by accident, right? If you think that kind of a relationship or that kind of person is the kind of person that you could date, they exist. That's all I have to say. They exist. They're out there. But as far as fatherhood goes, um, yeah, initially I had told her early in our relationship when we were just dating, I had told her I didn't want kids. So, and in her mind, she thought, well, Like he says that now, maybe it'll change, and if it doesn't change, she had it in her mind. If it doesn't ever change, then I guess it's not going to work out. But you know,
Mhm.
and she was realistic about that, and she was upfront about it too at some point. And I was in my head. Luckily, by the time she like confronted me with it, I wanted to have a child with her. I got really lucky
Right.
because like we were together for like 5 years or something, and
Mhm.
yeah, before like she's like, hey, real talk, right? And then
Mhm.
she was expecting I was just gonna like it was gonna be over, like that's what she thought was gonna happen. But I was like, no, yeah, I want to have I want to have a child with you. And even she was like, it was funny because like since we never really talked about it until one day she brought it up. She I think she was really surprised by my answer because of how it changed. Right, she was safe enough, and um, and then she had said before, like we had conversations before about like, well, even if you have a kid, like, obviously we have all these obligations and things we have to take care of, but I'm never going to ask you to be someone you're not. And she kind of had that. She had said something like that to me because that's one of the concerns I had brought up in the past about like why I didn't want to have children, right? Because it'd be like, oh, well, then there's
Mhm.
going to be these like expectations of me, and I might not even be able to raise them the way I think a child would be more healthily raised. I'll probably have to like give in to like the my the female partners like because they they'll have more dominion in my mind over the children, and so like I would be kind of still be left out in the cold as far as like being able to be the type of father I want to be if in fact I ever wanted to be a father, which at the time I didn't. It was just like a theoretical. And but yeah, with her it was different. Um, yeah, because I don't
Yeah.
know. I was worried I wouldn't be able to connect to my kids too. That was like one of my concerns.
Mhm.
What if I produce
Mhm.
children and I'm just as disconnected from them? But because I was able to connect to her, it proved to me that connection was possible, even if like relatively unlikely with strangers at the time, or actually completely unlikely. And luckily for me, after we had our first child, yes, I connected to them very quickly.
Mhm.
And like PDA and Mama Bear said, even more so once they started being able to communicate back. Uh,
Mhm.
I agreed. I kind of understand that sentiment. Yeah, I feel like a bond got easier and closer and stronger.
I think that like it can make a difference between if you're a male or a female, the decision to have children, because as a woman, um, being schizoid, like there's going to be a lot more pressure that's going to push us out into the social realm because like there's a lot of sort of interaction with other parents and like arranging play dates and a lot of that usually falls on the mother for some reason. I mean, it can be split depending on the nature of the relationship that a couple has, but yeah,
Unless her
if you
husband
kind
is schizoid too,
huh?
unless her husband is schizoid too, and he's like estranged from his family and doesn't have any friends because he doesn't want any, and then you have a kid with that person, and then all of a sudden you don't have to deal with any of that shit.
So have you had to deal with a lot of extra social stuff because of being a father now, and have you like adapted to that sort of stuff?
Well, I mean, I had to kind of deal with the social stuff to begin with because even when we were together, she's Mexican. My family's from Costa Rica. Mexican families tend to be very family oriented and very social.
Mm,
Like a lot of gatherings, like any excuse to get the family together and have food or something and talk. It's like whatever.
mm,
It was all the time. And so initially there was some conflict there because I would be like, well, I don't want to go. And she'd be like, well, you need to meet my family. I care about them. And so then over time, compromises, conversations, so on and so forth, I had to kind of recontextualize what it meant to do these things. So the way I got over a lot of the social engagements that were basically 90% of which were coming from her end, right? I really wasn't like all that connected to any of my sibling or my parents. So I wasn't like, oh, we have to go to my mom's or my dad's thing. No, it's like no, that wasn't really happening. So the way I kind of reconceptualized and made it easier was I'm connected to her. I care about her well being in a very deep way. Her well being is associated to me going to these gatherings, which make her happy. And she makes me feel safe and comfortable in other ways that even maybe I don't even know how to like express too well. So, and she puts up with some of my idiosyncratic thinking and eccentric behaviors. So then I think in my mind I went like, yeah, this is worth doing. Like, and so I mask up, uh, extra bubbly or social. I don't like shaking people's hands, but I did it. I don't like people that are like just because they're technically like family or something, they want to hug you. Like, but I kind of just dealt with it, and the whole time in my mind, especially later when I was able to really figure it out, I was just basically I was thinking of her anytime it made me uncomfortable. Um,
Right.
I was just thinking, look, this makes her smile. Uh,
Mm.
Her smiling is more
Right.
important to me than me being annoyed or
Right.
me like being like, ugh, I don't want to be here. And so, like, there was ways I would get around it. Like I would just like initially do the social thing, and then eventually, I would just eat really slowly or eat like two plates so that I'm eating. And so then, or I would just sit there quietly and listen, or I would be on my phone, or I would have a book with me and I would just kind of
Mm.
read. But I'd be at the table, and if anybody wanted to tell me something, I'd react and pay attention. But other than that, I kind of just stayed out of the conversations because I wasn't really interested in like
Mm.
family drama dynamics, whatever they were discussing. Um, and I didn't have much to say about it either. And what I did have to say about it could like piss people off sometimes. So I just kind of just kept to myself.
Right. You had your strategies and tactics in place.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But she was
so
worth it
like,
for me, to do this.
well, yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see why though. From everything you said, like I can see that how it would work. And with the parenting, like, do you have like strategies, like for example, so that you can get your alone time and that you're not interrupted, so that you're not sort of like overburdened by like um, sort of any demands on you. Obviously you want to invest in your children, but then at the same time you
Yeah,
got to find that balance, right,
of
between
course, of course.
engaging and not engaging. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, are you asking like in the past or like
So I'm
current?
asking that how do you sort of navigate the balance between
Well,
engaging and getting your alone time?
in the past, I wasn't very good at it, even when, uh,
Hmm.
even with my like first child, because I have two. I have a 13-year-old and a 4-year-old. I wasn't as good at it, so it would cause conflict, because it would be like, um, I wouldn't be as engaged with like some family outing or something associated to that, because I would just either like be distracted by something else or my thoughts or my phone or my usually some kind of handheld gaming system or a book. And so like it would like there would be these fights of like, why do you have to bring that thing with you? And you're like, we're gonna go with you know our small daughter and we're gonna go see her family and whatever. And I'd be like, well, that's because I have nothing to say at these places. But and that took her some time to kind of get used to. And then I started understanding why it was an issue and so on and so forth. But yeah, initially I would say I wasn't very good at it. um, or she would be like telling me like basically like 5 days a week I would be going to like my laptop at the time and playing like games or watching stuff, instead of like coming to bed at all, like to her. Because eventually she told me that she liked having me there, and we essentially compromised. I remember at some point we compromised so that I would be there until she like fell asleep, and when she fell asleep, she was fine that I would slink away. So
Mm.
like she's like, I just need the comfort. It helps me sleep. And then I would like either maybe some spooning would happen, or it would just be like me just laying next to her quietly reading something, and then when she fell asleep, she was sitting there snoring or sleeping, then I would just slink away, go back to my computer or hobby, or at the time a console, some video game console or something. So yeah, that's usually how that functioned for a while. Sometimes there's little problems even now with some of that, but I've actually made some strides. But yeah, yeah. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think this might be my last question, but I was just wondering that when your children grow up,
Mhm.
like, and they're old enough to understand things, do you think there will ever be any need for you to explain your schizoidism to them, or that you're zoid or stuff like that, or do you think it's something that isn't going to be an issue that will come up?
I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue because, like I've stated, I don't know if you recorded that part, but I've significantly made, well, I've made significant strides to basically overcome and tear down a lot of the defenses I had. Um, I A lot of it has to do with my work that I do already and the server I made, which allows me to engage with and communicate with a variety of people that deal with these issues. And so being surrounded and around a lot of safe people, even online, has sort of, or people that are understanding in the way that makes sense to me, sort of has opened up a lot of doors over the last three
And
years.
right, and I was wondering as well, has therapy had an impact on you in helping through your developmental process?
Yeah, I saw well, I've been seeing a psychologist for about I would say a little longer than I've been working on everything I do. So I would say I got lucky too with the psychologist because she she basically, I taught her everything she knows about schizoid PD. And honestly, guys, if you can find like an open and reasonable psychologist that is willing to learn just as much as you attempt to learn from them, that's great because a lot of them will not know anything about this. And so I had to essentially teach her everything I knew, and then she kind of used that information to figure out how to engage with me or engage with various parts of me uh, more easily, right? And the way I think and the way, like, she basically kind of had to like custom some stuff to suit
Hmm.
my style and my both my cognitive style, as well as my defenses and such. And yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, you've really explained like a lot about your journey, and it makes a lot of sense. Like you found somebody who fits in with your personality style. So
Mhm.
yeah, and yeah,
That's why I
I
say
don't think
I
I've got
got
anything
lucky.
else to say.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's why I say I got lucky. But for any schizoids out there that do what I date, those people exist. I just didn't know they existed. I accidentally found one, but they're out there, and the internet makes it a lot easier. I'm old. I'm almost 40. So when I started dating her, the internet wasn't as like social media y as it is now, and communication
Mhm.
wise. So yeah, it's easier to find people, and yep, there's some aloof guys or gals out there that might not necessarily be schizoid, but are far more understanding and are high in openness, and also high in like respect of each other's like boundaries and space and stuff. So they exist.
I think yeah, I think really like the sort of people that don't impose their emotional needs onto other people are going to be much more suitable partners for schizoids, and also connecting through interest like is a way to form a connection with someone that's not primarily emotionally based. So yeah, well, thank you for
Emotions come on their organically on their own.
mhm.
That's what I discovered with all this. But
Right.
it takes a long ass time. But anyway,
Yeah. So thanks for coming along and sharing your story, and
sure,
maybe
anytime.
you know.
Maybe what?
Then, and I was gonna say maybe I don't know if you can think of any other topics of discussion we could
Oh, I can.
do.
You have no idea. Have you ever watched any of my streams ever? I all I do is ramble for like an hour and a half. Like I loose associate like a madman, and just yes, I can come up with a lot of topics to say the least.
Yeah, the thing is, though, I kind of like don't have a broad range of like different things that I'm interested in or anything like that. But if it's to do with anything to do with psychology
Mm,
and relationships and theories, you know, I
mm.
saw a video that you did on your channel and you was talking to a guy about grey matter, about the brain and autism and things like that. It was quite interesting, you know.
Oh, when was that one? That was a
It was a
long
little
time.
while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, usually those are people. I don't usually talk about this stuff, but I will. I don't usually bring up like neurological components,
Mm,
but when people do, it's really interesting to me. I'm more. I tend to have a more practical and psychological approach toward things, right? But I definitely acknowledge the importance of any kind of brain science, neuroscience, when it comes to these matters, especially when it comes to pharmaceuticals and things like that too. But but yeah,
right.
yeah.
Did you have anything you want to say before you go? You can just have a free flow.
Well, yeah. Just I gotta just shill my shit, right?
Hmm.
All right. Remember YouTube, Schizoid Angst. Also, Zoid Void is the Discord server. If you're a schizoid or have strong inclinations that it might be the case, go ahead and join my server. You go through an application process. We've gotten pretty good at vetting it, and it's a really, really chill place with a bunch of really weird people. But there's almost we never have to mod at all, almost ever, like ban or anything. It's only when people like it's usually in the sections that aren't the schizoid sections where that happens, which there is. So if you're just like you can join the server and not have to go there, but those channels are more just like kind of a clusterfuck. I'll be honest. And yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I mean that's all I really need to bring up, at least for today.
All right then. Well, goodbye then.
Well, goodbye. All right. Is it